Welcome back to Bleav in Softball. I'm your host, Jenna, and I don't know about you, but somehow I already have a bit of a softball hangover in between weekends, and it's only February. There were just so many games that were so good and so fun to watch, not just in Clearwater, but all throughout the country. And there's still more coming, which is what we're here for. So however you got here today, whether on an audio podcast platform like Apple, Spotify, etc., or watching on YouTube, thanks for being here. Go ahead and subscribe and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bleav in Softball. That's BLEAV. All right, let's go through today's batting order. First, we'll be covering our bases. I'll give you some news and callouts from around the softball world. Then we'll head into today's interview with Jessica Allister, the head coach of Stanford softball, my assistant coach when I played on the farm, and just the fearless leader who has really evolved the program over the last several years and continues to. And I had a chance to catch up with her before the season started, and she was actually the third guest ever on this show. And now she's hitting third for us here in season 4. Fun, full circle stuff. Then we'll end things with the foul tip of the week, which is where we share tips to help us get better. All right, let's get it going. Covering our bases. BetOnline remains your number one source for all your sports betting this season. Everything from pro and college basketball to UFC and MMA and more. You'll always find the latest odds, team matchup info, player news, and game trends at BetOnline. With live betting options, free contests, and live scores for almost any sport or game imaginable. BetOnline is truly the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite leagues and events. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use promo code BLEAV, that's BLEAV, to receive your rewards. BetOnline.ag, where the game starts. All right, and where we're going to start at first. First things first, there's a new number one in town, UCLA. This is the first time that OU has not been number one in at least one or pretty much all the polls since 2021. Like, this is momentous, although still very early in the season. I think the thing that I noticed about UCLA that I really liked is that they have this sort of championship level energy. And what I mean by that is not just the talent and the depth throughout the roster, which is obviously tremendous, but it's just the fight and the mentality and the cohesiveness that they have. And it's really early on, but they're showing those signs already. Like, there was a lot of grit. Like, for example, they went undefeated in Clearwater, but they had to battle pretty much every inning. It was a 1-run game with Louisiana, 2 2-run games with Alabama and Florida State. And I guess we could say the epic battle with Florida State at Clearwater, again, is now going to be just an annual thing. Because if you remember last year, they went 8 innings with a seminal walk-off on primetime ESPN. So I vote let's just keep this on the schedule every year because it was very fun. But very gritty for the Bruins. And then also good at turning the page. You know, Savvy Pola made an error and was pulled against Louisiana. Then fast forward 2 outs in the 7th inning, she hits in the game-tying run and ultimately scores the game-winning run. That's a good mentality to have. And there's also just new blood that seems to be sort of raising the standard, or at least pushing the team forward, which is what you want. You know, freshman Jordan Woolery had her first career home run, also happened to be a grand slam. Not just the result, but also just how excited everyone was for her. And then her and Megan Grant, another freshman, also lead all freshmen in the nation in RBIs after the first couple weeks. So just having that just energy come from the youngsters in addition to your older leaders is huge. And there's also this level of trust. And that's not just among the players, but also between the coaching staff and the players. You know, on a 3-0 count, Maya Brady had the green light and it led to her just hitting a bomb out of the yard. Like, that level of trust, I mean, let them swing it until proven otherwise. Especially for your hottest and best hitters, like, why not? Why not go for it? So I loved seeing that kind of trust, and made me think about last year when we had Coach Kelly I on. She talked about how she has an acronym that spells out Bruins to represent each phase of the year. The preseason tournament phase that we're in right now represents the U, which is the unity phase, where they learn about themselves and they're tested. And I think we're seeing that unfold really nicely for them right now. So listen to her episode from last season for the full acronym breakdown, because it really is fascinating. Because I think it's part of what all of these things are, which is just championship level stuff. I'm not saying they're guaranteed a national championship. It's so early. We know that nothing is guaranteed, especially in today's game. But these are things that, you know, when you look at past champions, they've had these qualities. And whoever this year's eventual champions end up being, they'll need at least some of these qualities to get them there. So not only did UCLA play well, we know OU lost to Baylor. They're human. We said it last week. Patty Gasso, though, what I loved is her talking about how valuable the loss is. And there was actually an Oklahoma alum and national champ, Erin Miller. She tweeted, "One thing I know about Gasso, she never wastes a loss. Take it, use it, and be better for it." That is also championship level stuff. Which brings me to the second item on the agenda. The most anticipated game this weekend is OU and UCLA at the Mary Nutter tournament. All the games are on Flow Softball. If you want to watch them, it's supposed to rain, but they're going to do their best. And I have some ones that I think you should circle on the schedule. Obviously, OU, UCLA, Florida on Thursday to kick things off. That should be interesting. Top 5 matchup, Washington, Kentucky. There's also a lot of just Power 5 matchups with Northwestern Oregon, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Mizzou, Oregon State, UCLA, Kentucky, even Mizzou, Oregon, Florida, Oregon, UCLA, Northwestern, UCLA, Texas A&M, Kentucky, Northwestern, OU, Utah. I feel like I could just keep going. And then Sunday is the big one. But I want to say, in addition to all these Power 5 matchups that we love to see this early, don't forget about the rest of them. A team to watch in general who will be at Mary Nutter is Fullerton. They've already beaten Cal, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Liberty this season, all very competitive teams. They're stacked with their schedule. So they're playing Oklahoma, Florida, Oregon, Oregon State, and San Diego State, which is another team that we should keep our eye on after a great postseason run last year. And then, of course, they're going to host Judy Garman, another epic tournament, the weekend after. But it just is really cool, fun atmosphere. And I remember playing in Mary Nutter and Judy Garman, actually. I think one of my first collegiate home runs was at Judy Garman. But with Mary Nutter, the Field of Dreams in Palm Springs, it's just cool. If you've never been, it's where the fields are modeled after major league fields, like Wrigley, Yankee Stadium, etc. And I've actually played a lot of travel ball tournaments there too. And it was a big stage to do it in college, but also sort of familiar. And almost reminded me of, oh yeah, why I love the game, how I chose this path, and because I played there at different levels, And I think it's just an awesome way to get these high-level matchups early, the kind that kind of give you the butterflies in your stomach in a good way. I'll give you an example. I remember my junior year, we played Tennessee, and my teammate, Ashley Chin, threw a one-hit shutout for the win. And I looked this up, actually, just to make sure I remembered it right. The Renfro sisters were in the circle. ESPN's Madison Shipman was playing shortstop. Raven Siobhan, who was in the lineup, she was actually a guest on this show back in season 1. Just really, really cool to look back and think about that. So it's just awesome. I'm excited to see this for today's players. And third, speaking of Tennessee, huge news is that Monica Abbott is retiring. One of the GOATs. And I honestly, though, I didn't know if this day would ever come. She's 37 years old. But she played 20 years with Team USA, which is literally more than half her life, if you think about that. 2 Olympic silver medals. She was one of the youngest in 2008 and then one of the oldest in 2020. And it was her idea, actually, to go for it in 2020 with Kat Osterman, and they did it together. And she also played 16 years professionally. She played in the Japanese League and in the US, 17 titles, multiple MVPs, and of course, the first $1 million arm. So that contract that was so huge for softball to put us on the map. And she was a Hall of Famer at Tennessee. We all know this. 4-time All-American, National Player of the Year, Honda Award. She really made the SEC cool at a time when the Pac-12 was overwhelmingly dominant. She went from California to the South, and that move in itself, even Karen Weekly said it in one of her tweets, like that was a catalyst for SEC softball today. And she was actually a guest on our 12th episode ever back in season 1 at the height of quarantine 2020. I joked around with her that another guest, Kaylani Ricketts, who I played against in college, actually listed her as a hero on her MySpace, which is pretty funny to think about now. But just, we talk about it all of these experiences, the secret to her longevity, her relationship with Kat, how much Tennessee Orange that she owns, and even what she might want to do when she retires. So tune into that to hear more about Monica and what she may be doing moving forward. I also definitely recommend reading the D1 softball piece by Graham Hayes. He's a great writer. He's been covering the sport for so long, and he referred to her as having a timeless excellence, which I felt like was so spot on in terms of description because she just kept going. She just kept going. She didn't like retire, come out of retirement. She just kept going. And she became really a bridge from one era to the next because of it. And he said, the first of the SEC superstars and the last of the old school aces. And I think that's just so true. And, with Monica Abbott, she is the reason we have Kaylani Ricketts and Allie Carta with Team USA, Montana Fouts in the SEC, Kelly Maxwell, if we're thinking about the lefties in today's game. Like, that is real impact that's going to continue even more as this game goes on. And speaking of today's game, PSA, this weekend is Stanford's home opener as well. They're coming off of 2 big road wins over ranked Georgia. Freshman Nigel Kennedy, actually the Pac-12 pitcher and freshman of the week, and D1 softball player of the week. They're going to be hosting some good teams like Michigan, Boise State, and Nevada, who they'll face first on Friday night. I'm going to be on the call all weekend for the Stanford Invitational. It's actually super easy to tune in. pac-12.com/live. You go there, you can see all the streams that are live, or you can go to Stanford softball schedule, which is on gostanford.com, and just click on the watch link next to each game, and it'll take you right there. And someone else who's obviously going to be there is today's guest. So let's head into the interview. She is the Stanford Head Coach, 2019 Pac-12 Coach of the Year, All-American catcher on the farm, 2-time Women's College World Series participant, and one of my former coaches and friends, Jessica Allister. Coach Al, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great, JB. Thanks for having me.
I always love it. And I know it was funny. We were talking about before we actually hopped on to record. Looking back, you were my 3rd guest ever on this show. And that was 3 years ago, like right before COVID hit in 2020. That is wild to think about.
It is wild to think about anything prior to COVID. So yes, that too. Add it to the list, right?
100%. And we actually were in person in your office. And the reason that sticks out is because pretty soon after that, I didn't get to see anyone in person. So there you go. But, obviously the world has evolved a lot since then, but also the Stanford softball program has.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to talk about it, not just as an alum, but also as an alum too, but also just as somebody who loves the sport. And, I know you're very much a be where your feet are kind of person and just looking forward. But I think it's important really for people to understand the story of Stanford softball and the journey that you've all been on and how it's still going to continue. So with that in mind, looking back to 2022, what a year, first of all. Congratulations on the year.
Yeah, it was a good one. It was a lot of fun, some ups, some downs, but overall just a wonderful journey with a wonderful group of young women.
Yeah. And I just I want everyone to understand this, right? So I'm going to do it. I'm going to list off the things that were accomplished in 2022, even though with the caveat, I know you're looking forward just to 2023 and what's coming up next. But just so everyone understands, obviously you won the Tuscaloosa Regional in Alabama, first time winning the regionals and going to Super since 2011, which was my junior year. And then the first time hosting Super Regional since 2009, which was, oh, by the way, my freshman year when you were an assistant coach with the program at the time. And that was such a big deal too, because, I remember with my experience, we hosted everything like supers and regionals every year until my junior year in Alabama in 2011. So just on a personal note, the full circle moment was definitely not lost on me. But I think just in terms of keep raising the bar is just seems like what has been happening with Stanford softball. And for you, what stands out to you most about that Alabama trip?
Yeah, it's interesting when I think about the year. Obviously, we played some really good ball in Tuscaloosa, and I'm proud for the way that we performed on that stage for that weekend. But really, to me, that's not the defining moment of the year. And I think, obviously, that's you want to be playing your best ball at the end, and there's some real excitement about winning the regional and getting to host the super regional and all of that. But I really think that's one weekend out of the year, and the bigger story and what I'm, most proud of is just kind of the season as a whole. And when you look back and you look at taking the series from UCLA, taking the series from Arizona State, taking the series from Arizona for the first time ever in the history of the program, it just, we put together a really strong Pac-12 season, and then beating Oklahoma State at Oklahoma State, beating Missouri at Missouri. It was a good season. And I think the narrative, oftentimes, focuses on, winning in Tuscaloosa, which is great. And, I understand why. And obviously it was a wonderful weekend and one I remember fondly. But I think that the entire strength of the season is lost when you just focus on that one weekend. And, we were playing really good ball. So it was a fun year.
Well, and that's exactly right. Like, yes, that's when everybody, if they weren't already, when they started paying more attention,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not when everything started for the team last year, and even just for the program as a whole. Like, by no means, there were definitely ripple effects that were put in place and a foundation that was laid long before that. It was just one of those moments or experiences, I guess, where it was like, oh, okay, wow, we got to the place we said we wanted to go. Now we want to keep going and go to this next place.
Yep.
But it was like a nice milestone, but definitely not the whole story. I think that's a very
Absolutely.
important point you made.
Yeah.
And I just remember too, I don't know if you remember this, Coach Al, but I FaceTimed Ashley Hansen afterwards. And
Good.
I like flashed you on the screen real quick because I was like, I need somebody who was around last time when we were here to understand and share this moment.
Oh, that's awesome.
Uh,
Well,
so
that's the beauty of all this too, right? And one of the coolest things about, coaching at my alma mater, and, even if Stanford wasn't my alma mater, all of the opportunities and, just wonderful experiences that it gives people, it makes it amazing in its own right. But I think just that connection to former players and former teammates, and just the pride that you can feel just swelling through was a really great experience, and special for sure.
I think something that's been captured too in recent years and will only continue to get better is this like balance of the alums and sort of the Stanford softball community being really excited and engaged in this way, but also really seeing the program not just get back to where we were or however you want to think about it, but really like make it their own. That's something that I was, as an alum and just in general, particularly proud of last season, was because I was like, yes, like there are those personal connections and some of the history and all of that. But I felt like the program and the team really made it their own journey, which is so important.
Absolutely. And yeah, there's a number of different things to touch on. We found some personality, Tatum Boyd with her ooshka hat. I mean, you know, those of you who don't know Tatum out there, she's just one of the world's most amazing human beings, and just wonderful, and a great teammate and a great person, and incredibly funny. I hope she doesn't actually hear this. She doesn't need to know that I think she's funny. But just kind of what she brought, the energy she brought, and the spirit she brought, and then to see it just catch on with the team, and then catch on with the parents, and then catch on with the fans. It was fun. And you're right. That's what, draws people to softball, that you get to see the personality of the players. And I think it's a unique sport in that sense, that you have this real connection, and get to see, who they are. So that was enjoyable for sure. And then I think the other piece, and I wrote our fifth year seniors that are here this year, Taylor Gindelsberger, Emily Young, and Emily Schultz. I write the team holiday cards before we send them off. And I talked to them about how proud they should be about just how much the program's progressed, under their care. So if they look at where the program was when they committed to us in 2017,
Yep.
and where the program is now in their fifth year, that they should be incredibly proud of themselves. And I know that that's special for me, just to see them kind of, buying into a hope, a wish, and a dream. With some backing as to reasons that we should be able to do it. Best athletic department in the country, a coaching staff who knows what it takes to get there, and an education that's going to set you up for the rest of your life. But then just putting in the blood, sweat, and tears to, churn those visions into, a reality, and with hopes to take the next step. So I think that was a pretty cool moment for them. And I've been impressed with kind of their leadership this fall, this winter, and I know we're ready to get back on the field.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right to the ooshka hat point. I remember asking you last year, Coach Al, I don't know if you remember this, but I was like, can you tell me what's the deal with ooshka, the pink cowboy hat? Like, what is going on? And you were like, JB, I don't know. Go talk to Tatum Boyd.
Yeah.
So now I finally get it. It was just like that energy that really like the team embodied. And I think you're right. I think like that comes from that upperclassman sort of leadership. But I think something that seems to be a trend to me, tell me what you think, but over these last several years with Stanford softball is there's been that upperclassman leadership, but then there's also been that underclassman like energy and hunger to where everybody's contributing all throughout the roster. Does it feel that way?
Yeah. And I think that's the hope, right? That's the hope that the upperclassmen throughout their years are going to grow into those leadership roles and really set the standards for what the program's all about and embody those standards and, show the underclassmen what it looks like to wear the jersey and what that means every single day. And then to continue to bring classes um, onto the team that, are here to get the best education in the world and compete for championships and just enjoy both those processes and the ups and downs that go throughout those two things. So I think, yeah, the goal is to have both those things. Great upper class leadership and, tremendous underclass groups that come in year after year. And if you can stack those groups together, you got a chance to put together a special roster.
One of the favorite moments that I had from that trip, because I was really glad I was able to be there in Alabama with the team covering for radio, but getting to be with you all on the bus after too. And this really like bled into the rest of postseason, right?
Mm-hmm.
But everyone's like screaming at the top of their lungs, dancing to like these songs. I think it was like Every Time We Touch might have been the song that was playing. And it was like freshmen through seniors,
Yeah.
and it was, I think that to your point of like enjoying it and like,
Mm-hmm.
you do have to kind of learn how to enjoy like the tough times too, but like let yourself have that moment, and then it's on to the next.
Well, and college athletics is special in that way. Never again in life are you going to work that hard with that many people towards one common goal. And it's special and it's a mistake not to enjoy it.
Yeah. And there's plenty of other things to enjoy too. You mentioned it. I think to me, I kept calling Stanford streak snappers last year because yes, it was the UCLA series. You took the series and from ASU, but also snapping win streaks that were very long. And then Alabama hadn't lost in a regional round at home like that ever. And then here's Stanford, right? But what I think is cool about it too is I think you did an interview like not long after the season. And you said, if you would have told me last year in the throes of all of it that this is where we would be, I would have believed you because I believe in us. And I loved that because that's not what you're thinking, right? When you're reading this quote and what you think is going to come, like, oh, I wouldn't have believed you. No, I did. I would have believed you.
Yeah.
And you've talked a lot about how it wasn't this like, oh, we're just going to cross our fingers and hope. Like there was actually confidence there. Like, no, we can do this throughout the entire season.
Yeah. And like I said, I think we earned that. And when I talked earlier about, playing good ball on a weekend, in Alabama being kind of, the shining moment that people want to talk about and look back at, it was a culmination of the confidence that we'd earned throughout the season by playing good ball and, beating good teams and competing in the best conference of the country. I mean, you see what the Pac-12 did at the end of the year. I mean, it's obvious that we were battle tested.
Mm-hmm.
And, at that point, nothing fazed us. So, it was a fun journey. I wish we would have played a little bit better, here at home against Oregon State in the Super. I think, as I look back on it, we weren't ready, and it's kind of the same way that I felt the year before at regionals at Arkansas. Like we didn't play our best ball. So we'll learn from that. But a special year. And like I said, just excited about what that looks like for this year moving forward.
Yeah. And just to add one more thing to the list of things that helped build the confidence leading up to the postseason, you've mentioned pretty much everything else, like the ranked wins on the road against Mizzou, Oklahoma State, all of that. But the back-to-back no-hitters, including a perfect game in there with Elena Vaughter, Reagan Krause, and Molly Millar was awesome. Like that. But those are the kinds of things like, see, this was happening all season long. And it just culminated in a way later on when there happened to be a lot of exposure. But I just throwing that little tidbit in there with the pitching staff.
And the best part of that weekend is I think the rest of the pitching staff was more excited for the pitcher that it happened to than the actual pitcher that it happened to all weekend. And that just speaks to the sisterhood that is our bullpen. They cheer for each other. They support one another. They are stronger together, and they really do care for one another. And it was a fun weekend.
That's been really evident too. I mean, we talked about Tatum Boyd's personality, but I know when we've been prepping for broadcasts and I've chatted with you before Pac-12 Network games, you've mentioned things like how Elena Vaughter is just right in there. She's not too cool for anything. She's like the first one over there trying to move the mats and trying to get all the equipment out for everybody. And just that sort of like leadership is also important. Like it's not just the vocal stuff, but also leading by example as well.
Absolutely.
But you said it too. You're like, okay, the progress from the regional before in 2021 in Arkansas. But just to give everyone an understanding, because like I said, I want everyone to get this. 2018 was your first season.
Mm-hmm.
This is coming off of a 2017 where it was like a sub 500 team. Then you get the most overall wins and most conference wins in the last 4 years, including like wins against top 10 teams like UCLA and Arizona. That's year one. I know you might be uncomfortable with me listing off your accomplishments, by the way, but we're going to do it, Coach Al. We can do hard things.
All right.
Next year, 2019, first time going to postseason after a 6-year drought since 2013. That was when you were Coach of the Year. 2020, didn't get to finish that, obviously, because nobody did, but it was one of the best starts in the last decade before COVID hit. Then 2021, you go to regional in Arkansas. Then 2022, you go to super regionals. I think we're trending clearly in this direction where I think a World Series
We got to be ready to beat LMU day one. That's all we care about right now. We are tunnel visioned on preparing for LMU on day one of the season. And LMU is good, and they've got a good pitcher. Yeah. So we got to make sure that our tunnel vision stays very sharp.
See, I knew that this is the type of thing you were going to say because I knew it, but I'm like, but I also just want people to understand the evolution, like I said, but also how you did it, though, is exactly this, what you're saying right now. Yeah, we're focused on the next thing at hand. Like, I think I've asked you questions about that before. Like, what do you think about the rest of the Pac-12 season? And you're like, nope, we're focused on Oregon next weekend. We're focused on this. We're focused on, right? But that's also how you did it. So it makes sense.
Yeah, that, and I don't think I can speak enough about just the quality of young women that we have brought into the program. And, again, Stanford is unique. And I use that word not lightly. I think unique gets thrown around a lot in situations where maybe it's not necessarily applicable, but Stanford's unique. And it truly is for the right student athlete, if you want to compete at the highest level athletically and earn a degree that can, change your life. This is the place to come. And it's not for everyone. In fact, it's not for most. But for the right student athlete, there is no better undergraduate experience. And we've been able to bring young women into this program that recognize that and want both those things. And just being able to stack those classes together and build a roster that's invested in both of those things. There's a reason that we're the best athletic department in the country. And it's because the teams, across the department are filled with, tremendous young people that aren't willing to settle. So we just have been able to put together a really, really good roster. And I Bleav that I have the best assistant coaches in the country. Seeing firsthand what, Coach Merchant and Coach Nyberg do. They are exceptional at their jobs. So I think just getting the right people in the right places has allowed us to, take some steps and put a good product out on the field.
Well, I remember asking you last time we talked a few years ago, like, how did you start in terms of building a program? Because not the first time, did it at Minnesota. You were there for 7 years. And eventually in 2017, in your last season, it's the highest ranking of the program's history at number 1, right? Mm-hmm. And there's like I think it was 56-5 record that you had. It was pretty tangible what that looked like. So it's not the first time, but you right away were like, it's really about the people and establishing that staff, and to bring Merchant with you from that experience, but also her own as a player at Michigan. Then you got Tori Nyberg, who was a Stanford pitcher. Mm-hmm. It's I think something that can be easily overlooked sometimes when we talk to coaches. We talk a lot about the players and how you coach the players, but it's also the staff and how you actually even coach or work with the staff too. It's huge.
Yeah, it's absolutely. Your coaches are the people who are interacting with the student athletes every day and shaping their experience. And like I said, I don't think there are better assistant coaches out there than Jess and Tori.
Yeah. A lot of Jessicas too in this Stanford.
You said it.
Right? Allister, Merchant, Mendoza, just for good measure. Whatever. I think you might remember this too. Yeah, there were like 2 Tegans when I played, 2 Ashleys, 2 Jennas. There were 3 Emilys, obviously, recently with Klingeman and Schultz and
we still
Young.
Have 3. Emily Jones is a freshman, so don't worry.
Right.
We've stayed strong at 3.
Perfect. Yep. Good. That's recruiting right there. But really, with recruiting, you said it. I mean, I think a lot of people will confidently say, and I think that you do have to have like a level of belief in this is the best program, or this is the best school, or this is the best X, Y, or Z. But with Stanford, it's not so much a an emotional claim. It's really more factual. And I
Mm-hmm.
say that as an alum, but it really is true. It's like, this is a top 5, top 3 academic school in the country. You said it, number 1 athletic department. That's not based on nothing. It's the most national championships in the nation. To the point where the first time I went in the Home of Champions, Coach Al, which for everyone listening, it's basically the Hall of Fame. They were like, yeah, here are a few of the national championships that we won this year. There's not enough room for all of them. So these are just this year's,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's wild when you walk around and like actually think about it. But with that does come some challenges. Like you said, like it's not for everyone. You have to be really academic. Your shortstop, Emily Young's been studying aeronautics and astronautics.
Yep.
That's not like a casual thing. So just for you guys, how do you, I mean, obviously it helps with your own experience and you actually walk this path, but how do you kind of manage the day to day when it's like such high demands in every aspect of the experience?
Well, I think we've got players that are built for it, right? We're not bringing people in who aren't capable of handling it, and I think that's wonderful too.
Yeah.
Stanford, doesn't compromise with admissions as far as who gets to come and compete on the campus. They're going to bring people into the situation that are capable and can thrive. So yes, we're asking people to sit in the classrooms with the best and the brightest, and then compete on the athletic fields, with the best in the country. But we're asking people that can handle that, to handle it.
Yeah.
And it's just an environment. It can be a couple of things, and probably both at the same time. But it can be very humbling, but it's also very inspiring.
Yes.
And I think when you're walking around and you're walking through the dining hall, and you're seeing the men's gymnasts and the women's golf team and the women's basketball team and the women's volleyball, national champion, national champion, national champion, national champion. You're like, she's not any different than me. Why can't I do that?
Yeah. Right.
And I think that, that can be really inspiring. You're an average of the people that you spend the most time with.
Mm.
And that group of people here is pretty phenomenal.
I like that. And I've heard you say that before. You're an average of the people you spend the most time with. It makes me think of too, I remember when I first started my just professional career after college, we talked a lot about, I worked at LinkedIn, and we talked a lot about like, who's your personal board of directors? Like who is a part of that inner circle that you rely on, that you spend the most time on, that you talk through things with, that you trust. And, that does make a big difference. And there's no shortage of, excellence in that regard.
None. None at all.
It's very true. But also, we've talked about before how the approach then has to be a little bit different, because yes, the transfer portal in a general sense, let's say, very active, as active as it's ever been for college sports, but for softball in this context. But for Stanford, it's not a casual thing to transfer into Stanford. That's really not how it works. So you've talked about how there's really this like development aspect that you really focus on versus obviously. Yeah. Why is that important?
Well, it's just a great thing. We, as you said, the transfer market really isn't available to us. And it's definitely not a reliable avenue. There might be bits and pieces here and there where we can, add some really valuable pieces. Eleni Sprack is transferring in from Santa Clara a couple of years ago. She got into the aeronautics, astronautics major on her master's program on herself, and had an extra year and wanted to come play. And like, there's some bits and pieces here and there where there's some people that there's real added value. And when we can take advantage of that and, add phenomenal student athletes to our program, we're going to do it. But it's definitely not something that you can count on and rely on and build your program on. They're just kind of the added bonuses along the way. So that we've got to be a developmental program. And when I first got the job in 2018, that was, one of the conversations that we had with every recruit that came on campus, and that we talked on campus about a lot. We're gonna do this, but we're gonna do it the old-fashioned way, and it's gonna look a little bit slower than some other places. And you look around the country and you see people taking over programs, and at a snap of a finger, all of a sudden they're competing at the highest level. But they've overhauled the roster, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. But that's just not how things go here. So our process looks a little bit different, and it's just stacking good recruiting class after good recruiting class after good recruiting class. Getting the players on the roster to buy in and believe that if they put the work in, they'll get the payback that they want. And then just having, a coaching staff that really believes in player development,
Yeah.
and our players, getting the opportunities, and, getting better throughout their 4 years. So we're very much a developmental program. Um, and that's through necessity, but I also like that. I think that plays to our strengths. Again, I think my coaching staff is tremendous, at what they do. So, it doesn't scare us to live in that space. But it's different for sure.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it too is now there are certain things that are being like adjusted too, meaning like what are your thoughts on the new transfer rule? Like that's not an area you play in that much anyway, but like now there's that rule where it's like, oh, maybe you can't play just like right away after you transfer anymore.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of nuances. I think, there's a lot of well-intentioned people trying to make decisions that are in the best interest of college athletics and college athletes, and individuals. And I think that probably it's not the easiest, um, intersection to get to what that looks like for everyone. So I don't begrudge anyone who is trying to walk that tightrope and figure all of those things out. But it's not really a part of our world. So I allow others to fret over it.
Yeah, which is fair. Maybe easier that way in this case. But at
Well,
the
it's also,
same,
for
yeah,
the athletes on our program, like we're invested in them.
right.
So we can't, bring in large classes, see who sorts out, get rid of the rest, or bring in a transfer if we didn't think that the freshman was good enough. Like we're committed to the players within our program,
Right.
and we're committed to their development. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's, I think it's good.
Yeah. Well, and this is one of the elements a lot of people say, like going to Stanford or going to places, it's a lifetime decision.
Mhm.
This is a good example of like, well, it really is because
Yeah,
you are invested in those players. There isn't all this movement in and out of the program like that. It truly is like pretty much for life for the most part.
absolutely.
Yeah. But then there's also exciting news with the third paid assistant
Yeah, it's
and the
great.
staff. We keep talking about how important the staff is. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a long time coming, right? It's obvious when you look at our rosters have gotten bigger, um, and just kind of the student athlete to coach ratio and how important the volunteer position is. And while maybe at one point in time it served as, just somebody who every once in a while showed up and kind of added a little bit here or there and was just maybe an extra fun goer, or somebody to catch a bullpen, like, that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
And the volunteer assistants are huge pieces of our staff, and our student athletes deserve to have great coaching. So I think it's a huge step forward. It also is going to allow a lot of opportunity, for just more young women to get in the game,
Yeah.
just more access. And that's something that's always a good thing. So the more people that can be involved in the game, the better. And the fact that we can now pay them instead of them trying to cobble together a living, while they're also trying to do what's become a full-time job, it's a win.
Well, that's right, because there are just practicalities around it where, like, Palo Alto, for example, is one of the most expensive places to live in the country.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful. There's a reason,
Oh,
JB.
there is a
There's a
reason.
reason.
That's why I've barely ever left. So yes, I agree. But so this is nice. So it's
Yeah,
easier to be able to kind of like live that dream, and it's really ultimately, like you said, it's more women in sports at the end of the day.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
But these are just all those like little things too that go into running a program that,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what we're talking about at the Women's College World Series, on camera and all of these things, but it is a big part of like the day to day. And even things, speaking of the World Series, even things like, and there's something Stanford has to deal with, they're not the only ones, but it's a quarter system academically. So yeah, that's nice. You have a later start date maybe, but you don't get to play together or be together until late September. And then finals week is during the Women's College World Series.
Yeah.
So they're just, those little things that you have to keep in mind.
I mean, JB, if you're playing in the College World Series while you're taking your finals, it's fine.
Yep. Yep.
Nobody's upset about that.
Yep. That's exactly right.
Mhm.
That's exactly right. And it's literally the answer I'd expect you to say now that I think of it. But you mentioned earlier too, like the Pac-12 and how the conference as a whole ended the season really strong last year. 3 out of 8 teams in the women's college World Series were Pac-12. 2 were unseeded, right? Like that Oregon State, Arizona piece that everyone kept talking about that too. The unseeded parts, like you and Oregon State playing against each other in supers, all of that. But like, doesn't that kind of show that seeds don't matter to a certain degree?
Or that they're wrong.
Yeah.
It's just, it's interesting. And it's, I don't think there's any easy answer.
Yeah.
But I think it's obvious that we were, undervalued last year as a conference, and that bore out, in the postseason. But I can tell you right now, competing in this conference day in and day out, the level of play last year across the board was exceptional. And I'm actually looking it up right now because I want to make sure that I get this right.
Yeah.
It's loading on my phone. But when I look back, I'm looking at these end of the year rankings. Arizona, they finished tied with Cal for last in the conference, and then they played in the World Series. Like, that's how good the conference was.
Yep.
And I know Cal, Utah. I think if they had gotten in the postseason, I think they would have made some noise. We played those teams; they're good.
Yep.
So it's the strength of the conference last year, top to bottom. It didn't matter who was playing who on any given weekend. Like, nobody knew who was going to win. The talent level was very, very, very evenly distributed throughout. And I think that's the reason that we were successful at the end, is battle tested and, comfortable in competitive mode, facing great pitching. The pitching was exceptional.
Yep.
But it's the best conference in the country. And it's fun to play in.
Well, and when you say that too, it's like you've coached and played obviously in the Pac-12, but you coached in the Big Ten. You even were in the SEC when you were an assistant at Georgia for a while. Like, you have also seen what just like nationwide college softball is like. So you're not just saying that to say it, it's backed by evidence.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But then there comes to be, the preseason rankings this year, which I don't know if you really pay attention to that, because I know that's not your style. So you might not, but there is an element of still wanting the hard work that your team and program puts in to be recognized, right? I would imagine. Yep. But then you see like maybe some Stanford for the first time in a long time, and like all of them, which is awesome. It had been a while since that had happened. But then you see certain, like Oregon State's not on some after the run they had last year. ASU's not on some, even though they have new coaching. They still got a pretty good team put together there. And you see that sort of still playing out. So does that feel like, as a conference, there's still a little bit of a chip on the shoulder?
Yeah, but I think that's okay. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think when you're talking about the rankings, and obviously, it hasn't been lost on us that, the rest of the country started to realize what we've known for a long time, that we're a good ball club.
Yep.
And what I told our team was, it would be a mistake not to draw confidence from that.
Yep.
But that being said, nobody cares.
Yeah.
So making sure that, you allow yourself to draw confidence from some of those things and, to feel good about them. But at the same time, understand that, the only people whose opinions matter are those in your clubhouse.
Yeah.
And other than that, get out to the field, get to work, and get to competing. So, yeah.
Yeah. But that's important, though, and not that easy to do all the time, which is like take the good from it and leave the rest.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's easy, especially for very analytical people. And I say this from experience, which we all were in terms of Stanford student athletes. You can overthink pretty easily. But I think the team, from just like an outsider looking in and who's covered the program, has, I don't know, gotten more comfortable in that way.
Absolutely. No, we're in a good spot right now. We're in a good spot.
Yeah. And then there's the exciting news of the first Pac-12 tournament ever.
Yeah.
This year in 2023. I know you've been a big proponent of it.
Huge.
For a long time.
I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. It's just softball, I think, is on people's minds often and getting watched a lot, throughout the year. But really, in May, heading into June, there's just the audience for softball is there, across the board, nationally, television. And it's just a mistake not to, host a massive event. So I think you're going to see great softball. You're going to see great matchups. It's fun to be in elimination formats prior to the postseason. It's going to be a great TV event. It's going to be a great in-person event for our student athletes. I see only pros and no cons. So I'm fired up.
It just seems like it's a momentum builder,
Yep.
or at least a momentum continuer at minimum. Because before, it could be a little anticlimactic in terms of who's the champion at the end of it. You
Yep.
might not even be in the same ballpark or part of the country exactly as the other person if you're like the first and second and kind of trying to battle it out for being Pac-12 champions. And now it's like there will still be that regular season piece, but like there will be more of a postseason feel. So to me, yeah, it
Yep.
is that like that experience, that tournament feel for that momentum. And then you're right, the exposure I think is going to be key as well.
And it's going
Before,
to be fun to have, all 9 teams in one setting.
yeah,
There's a lot of excitement that comes along with that, and just a great environment.
yeah.
It's going to be fun.
Well, and the thing is, too, is we talked about the coaching staff at Stanford, but I think across the board in the Pac 12, it's a consistent thing that comes up with every coach, yourself included, that I talk to leading up to broadcasts and things is how proud everyone is to be part of the Pac 12, but also just how much respect there is between programs. And I think that has a lot to do with the leadership. I mean, all women head coaches, but then 6, including you, leading their alma maters.
Yeah.
Like that says something about each of those programs, actually.
Yeah. No, it's a wonderful group of women, and one that I very much enjoy, and find it a privilege to be a piece of.
Yeah. It's fun to cover, I'll tell you that. It's really fun to cover. And I find myself too, Coach Al, like I hope this doesn't come off as disloyal as an alum, but there will be people
Maybe.
that I won't. That was dramatic. That was dramatic. That was dramatic. But I'll talk to people, like I've talked to Chelsea Spencer before, like your colleague over at Cal, and I hear her passion for Cal the way that we felt it for Stanford, right? And I'm like, wow, I didn't know I could. I told her this. I was like, I didn't know I could like a Cal grad this much. Like this is weird. And same with like some Arizona alums and like I'm like, wow, I was programmed, to be competitive with you. And now I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this is really great getting to know just the quality people.
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of college athletics, right? Those rivalries are fun.
Yeah.
Like that's what makes it special. It's fun.
Yeah. 100%. But then, getting to what I'm sure you wanted to talk about the most, which is just this season. And we talked about the roster, right? And you mentioned we got another Emily in there. So thank goodness for that. Who, by the way, Emily Jones and then also Kylie Chung are both from my high school, Westlake High School.
Yep.
And that was just like a pleasant surprise to me because I don't know, there just hadn't necessarily been that, roadmap before. And so I just had to throw that in there because I'm very personally excited to see. Already seen Kylie, obviously, but now I'll get to see Emily as well. But you talked about the freshman class in a general sense and how excited you are, including the pitching.
Yep. It's it's been a great group. We knew when we signed them that we were bringing in, just an exceptional group of young women and athletes. And I have been nothing but impressed since they showed up on campus. And they are a wonderful group of personalities. Their teammates enjoy being around them. They're fun. And then they're ball players. I mean, they definitely, we're better this year than we were last year. And, that's at least on paper, we got to go do it on the field, but, and that's exciting, so to, bring back what we've returned and then to add in, some really exciting pieces. The depth is just going to be, a good thing, for the entire season. So yeah, starting in the circle, Nija Kennedy has just put together, a great fall and, came back, after the break and, is doing well. So excited about what she adds in the circle. Obviously last year pitching and defense was our strength and she makes us better in the circle. She's a great complement to what we already have. I think if I could have put together the piece that we needed, it would have been Nija. So just that addition is going to be huge. And I think that pitching and defense will continue to be our strength. And, I'll put our pitching staff and our defense up against anybody in the country. I think we're positioned well there. Nija obviously in the circle and then moving to the infield. River Mailer and Emily Jones have both done a tremendous job since they've gotten here. They're both going to be competing for playing time right away. Both lefty hitters, good speed, ability to drive the ball for power, really good defenders. And then Kira Chan in the outfield. Again, another lefty hitter, more speed, starting to drive the ball a little bit. She'll push for a little bit of playing time here and there. And then Allison Morikawa has really been she has been impressive in the box. And I think she's gonna have good at bats for us and, be really valuable in different pinch hitting opportunities to begin with, as she kind of, pushes to find her way into the lineup. So, excited about that class. And like I said, adding them to an already just stacked group of returners. It's exciting.
Yeah, this goes back to you got the super seniors, you got the freshmen. It's really everyone that's contributing to it, which is super exciting. I'm excited to watch and to cover the team this season. And I think it'll just be really fun to see the evolution from here, right? Because I think people are like, oh, wow, look what they did last year. So great. But it's like, but where do you go next? And I know you're like LMU day one, that's where we go next. But in a general sense, it's like some people think it's same roster, but it's not, Yeah,
totally. And actually the other player that I forget because she's not technically listed as a freshman, but she's going to be a freshman because she ended up redshirting last year. Ella Nato has just put together a tremendous preseason. And she missed last year with torn ACL, but she came back and, offensively, she's going to find a way in the lineup, and we're still moving around a lot of pieces to see exactly what that looks like. But I throw her in with the freshman class, and we just have a lot of newcomers who are, ready to do what the team needs for them to do and compete for playing time right away, which is awesome. But what I would add, and what you were talking about a little bit earlier, what I was impressed with our student athletes last year is that in our end of team meetings, to a person, when we talked about the year, they were all happy, but they all had a little fire in their bellies too. And it was Coach, we can be better. I'm like, I know, but still I'm going to need you to feel good about what you did and be proud of yourselves. And they're like, yeah, but we can be better. and it was awesome, and, it's one thing to feel that way at the end of the year. And then it's another thing to allow that to inform your work and allow that to make sure that you show up in September ready. And they did. So just, I think there was a fire that's been building a little bit, and, they're believing in themselves and buying in. And I just think that last year was a big boon to that. So I think we're ready to go. And 2 more weeks of practice, and got some things we got to get better at in those 2 weeks of practice, but it'll be exciting to, start the new season and see how it unfolds.
Well, and that sounds like a credit to recruiting too. And you talked about it, like certain type of people that you bring into Stanford and student athletes. And it's not surprise too, because I know that's how you are. You have a fire in your belly too. And I'm not just saying that because you also recruited me in my class, but but it's all true. All the above is true. But it's funny, Coach Al, I think back to my freshman year and the upperclassmen would tell us stories about like past seasons and fun stuff. And I think this was before everybody was just on one big bus. There were vans, right? So you drove one, Coach drove one, Coach Ford at the time drove one. And people were like, I remember they were sorting us into which van we would have been in, like the cool van or the misfit van or like the serious van. But I do remember them talking about with you how much you hate to lose. So if you lost, it was like no music, nobody talk.
I can't imagine that any of those stories are just a little bit not amplified. What's the word I'm looking
Exaggerated?
for? Exaggerated. Just a little. I'm just assuming.
Oh, I'm sure. But then I do talk to some of your teammates too, Coach Al. And I think who was I talking to? Dana Sorensen came on the podcast a while back, and she was talking about how competitive she was. And she was like, yeah, you really couldn't talk to me or Allister after a loss. We just needed some time, away. But now you have to talk to your team though, right? So is that something that you've kind of learned over time with putting the coaching hat on?
I mean, again, yes. Absolutely. And, there's different kinds of losses, right? So there's the losses when, you know, you feel good about the game and you just lost. And that's fine. Obviously you're going to try to make adjustments. And I think the ones that burn are when you feel like things could have been better. And whether it was in your preparation, execution, attention, any of those types of things. And those still don't sit very well with me. But you play the game at a high level in a great conference and you're going to lose. And that's part of it. And how do you recover?
Yeah.
So I think that there's a fine line to walk between, I think when you allow yourself to like be okay with losing, it's a slippery slope. And then it just gets easier and easier and easier. And you start to let yourself off the hook a little bit. But at the same time, you play this game at the highest level and you're going to lose.
Right.
So maintaining that balance of understanding it's part of the game and it's okay, but still, striving to do your best. I think that's the sweet spot that, we try to teach our athletes to exist in.
So in 2023, by the end of the season, what would need to happen for you to feel good about it? Not like, oh, we did everything we've ever wanted to do, because you're never satisfied, right? And that's a true competitor. But just like, what will you need to feel that way to look back on this season?
I would be lying, JB, if I thought I could answer that question right now. I think what I expect from them every day right now is to show up, work as hard as they can, and be great teammates along the way.
Yeah.
And as long as we're doing those things, and we stay really, really present and really, really focused, I think the limits are endless. But along the way, work as hard as you can, be a great teammate. That's all I really care about.
Again, being where your feet are and just stacking days like that. I mean, really though, that does seem to be kind of like the key to what you are doing, have done, and will continue to do. Well, awesome. on that note, Coach Al, to wrap up, I play a game with everybody that comes on the show. I think actually I may have experimented with this for the first time when you came on the show literally 3 years ago, but it's been refined since then a little bit, but it's called Safer Out. And
I'm ready.
Yes. And basically you're an umpire. All right. So okay. I'll bring something up, and if you like it or you agree with it, you'll call it safe. If you don't, then you'll call it out.
Oh no. Okay. I'm ready.
Okay. First one is video review.
Safe. Love it. Best thing ever.
Knew the answer, first of all. Sometimes I plant these, let's be honest. But I knew the answer because you actually called for review multiple times in Alabama. You've also been known to like pull out the rule book sometimes in weird situations that are happening in games. But I think you're on it. It's important.
Well, it's a couple things. One, we want to get it right. Like everybody wants to get it right. Umpires, coaches, everybody wants to get it right. And it allows us to get it right. So that's number one. And then two, I think it also, it eliminates a little bit of the posturing by coaches, trying to bully umpires into making calls. Well, if you think it was wrong, appeal it. If not, let's move along.
Yeah.
And I think both of those are good for the game. So love it. Yeah. Safe.
I think it's a good point too. Umpires want to get it right too.
They want to do their job well. Absolutely. Yeah. People forget.
Yeah. I mean, we all like to give them a hard time, but like they would like to do a good job.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I knew that one, but we'll move along. All right. NIL, name, image, likeness, safer out.
Oh man. I mean, it's safe. It's good. I'm going to call it a first draft idea that needs revision.
Fair to say.
Yeah, I think we've got the first draft down on paper. And I think there's some good things happening from it. I think that, it needs revision, and I think it will be, revised and molded and, all of those things. But I think there's some opportunity for women, and, I'm not here to say that that's a bad thing, but
right.
The people that are way above my pay grade, and that are in charge of figuring all of these things out, I'm sure it consumes an outsized portion of their time. They're trying to figure out how to get it right.
Yeah, well, like umpires, right? It's like, well, we want to get it right, so we have to figure it out.
Everybody wants to do their job well. Absolutely.
Yeah, everyone's trying here.
You said it.
All right, okay, 2 saves. Last one is bat flips, safer out.
Oh. Hmm. I think there's a time and a place. And I think when it happens, in a big moment, and it is just a reaction of celebration, I love it. I think it's great. I think that there's other times where toss your bat and jog around the bases. So
Yeah.
I'll give it a what do you like? Send it to review.
Apparently video
I'll
review.
ask for help. There's a time and a place, and in the right time and place, I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think I've ever seen, well, anyone ever, but also especially since you've been back, bat flip in any situation.
Maybe like, but it's just excitement, right?
Right.
Like I
Like
think
there's a
I don't think
difference.
bad. Yeah,
Yeah. Like a
I
fist
think there's a
pump
time and a
and
place.
yeah. Yeah. I get it. I get it. I think I agree. And most people kind of feel that way. They're like, I don't know, but like I get it. It just has to be done right or done well, or at least with good intent, I guess.
Or with no intent.
Yeah.
It just has to happen.
Right. That's a good
Maybe that's a
point.
better way
Not
to put it.
pre-planned,
Yeah,
authentic. Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was awesome, Coach Al. As always, thank you. I'm going to be seeing plenty of you as usual during the season, but it's fun to get this sort of early chat with you, and I'm excited to watch everything in 2023.
Well, look forward to seeing you out there, JB. Thanks for having me.
It's just always a pleasure to talk with Coach Al. I realized recently that I've known her for 15 plus years at this point, which is super hard to believe, but she really is a gem. So with that, let's transition to the foul tip of the week. This week's foul tip is about how the game doesn't know your age. We say all the time, for example, the game doesn't know who's supposed to win. It doesn't know rankings, it doesn't know records, stats, it just knows who shows up and executes on that day. To me, the game doesn't know age either. And really what I mean by that is just that age doesn't necessarily define you. I want to challenge the idea that your age determines certain behavior or outcomes. And honestly, we mentioned a few examples today. Coach Al herself took Stanford to its first Women's College World Series appearance as a freshman. And Ramona Shelburne and Jessica Mendoza have said multiple times before that she was one of the leaders to do that. And then she did it again as a senior. The UCLA freshmen we mentioned in covering our bases, Woolery and Grant, making an immediate impact. I didn't even mention before the Alabama 17-year-old Kenley Cahalan, who could still be in high school, but joined the Crimson Tide early, and she hit a home run against Florida State to break up the perfect game. And then you go to the other side of things, look at Monica Abbott's career, playing until she's 37. It's not 45 like Tom Brady, but it's a heck of a long time, especially in a sport with much less professional opportunity than the NFL. So just age doesn't matter in terms of results. It can definitely be a consideration. I'm not saying it's not. Be smart in recovery and taking care of your body as you get older, like Monica did, right? When you're a young kid, of course, don't lift too heavy or throw hundreds of pitches in a bullpen and risk getting hurt. Like, you can definitely consider age in this way. Maybe it's a factor, but it just doesn't have to be the determining factor. As usual, it all goes back to mentality and consistency. Believe and swing big like Megan Grant. Be disciplined and goal-oriented like Monica Abbott, and do it at any age. So that's it. The game doesn't know your age. That's the foul tip of the week. You've been listening to Bleav in Softball, part of Bleav Network and presented by BetOnline. The show is available anywhere you get your podcasts, wherever you listen, including Bleav.com and on YouTube too. Subscribe to the show, rate the show. If you liked it, write a review for it. If you didn't, don't worry about it. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Bleav in Softball. Again, that's BLEAV. You can reach out to me personally on Twitter at JennaBecerra01 and Instagram at JennaBecerra as well. Thank you for joining us, and catch you soon.